and although the doctors tried their best, she passed away. It was so incredibly devastating, especially when my Uncle Terry and grandparents made an appearance at the funeral. They were smiling from ear to ear and were loving seeing that Chantrell had passed away. Nathan did his best to ignore them, but then Uncle Terry went up and tried to take a selfie next to the open casket, and Uncle Nathan couldn't hold back his frustrations anymore. Fueled with rage, he ran over and smashed Terry's phone and then proceeded to punch him until he was unconscious. The police had to show up to break up the fight, but luckily no one pressed charges against each other and everyone was allowed to go home. Hi there, my name is Morris and I wish to share with you the story of how I became the owner of a very successful company. I do need to explain a few things first though so you can better understand what I mean by that though. For starters, my family doesn't have a great history of being very open-minded. Back when my father and his two brothers were in their 20s, the three of them were trying to figure out who they were. My father was the most successful as he managed to not only find a job as an accountant for a large firm, but he also met my mother shortly after doing so. A year later, my Uncle Nathan came home with a woman that he had started dating, and at the time, he had wanted to introduce her to the family, as he was thinking about proposing to her. The second that my other Uncle Terry and my grandparents saw her, however, they lost their minds. You see, my Uncle Nathan had fallen in love with a black woman by the name of Chantrell, and my father and mother were the only members of my family to accept them. Both my grandparents and my Uncle Terry started yelling at Chantrell and called her all kinds of racist names.
How dare you come to our house and dirty it with your presence? Nathan, I always knew you were an idiot, but to date a black person, that's just a whole new level of stupid. Your brother is right. I demand that you break up with this inferior woman right this instant. How dare you treat Chantrell like that? This is the woman I love, and you have no right to speak to her like that. If you don't start acting right, then I'll disown you.
My Uncle Nathan tried to argue on behalf of Chantrell and himself, but my Uncle Terry wasn't having any of it. They got into a fist fight, and after that day, my Uncle Nathan walked away and swore that he would never forgive his family. Thankfully, his relationship with my father remained good as my father and mother were the only ones that did not see anything wrong with Nathan dating a woman of a different race. In fact, they were just happy that he had found love. Years passed, and I was born, and my father and mother had to live dual lives. On one hand, they wanted to love and support my grandparents and my Uncle Terry, but on the other, they still loved Nathan and Chantrell, who had gotten married. It was difficult for them, but they made do. My father's accounting skills ended up being put to good use as Nathan and Chantrell were excellent at investing money into companies and finding ways to make them profitable. They had acquired more than a handful of different companies over the years. Some factories, restaurants, and even some computer programming firms. They had a knack for hiring amazing managers that kept the businesses running smoothly. As I got older, I learned that my aunt and uncle had tried to have a child of their own, but my aunt had a miscarriage and was unfortunately unable to have children after that. I can't imagine how painful it must have been for them, but after that, they began to treat me as if I was one of their own children. They spoiled me rotten, and when I got older, my uncle took me under his wing and showed me the ropes of their various businesses. Surprisingly, I was able to pick up a lot of hard lessons from him and like him and my aunt. I appeared to have a knack for seeing the profitability of a business fairly quickly. It did feel weird to keep my relationship with my Aunt Chantrell and Uncle Nathan a secret from the rest of the family, but my father insisted that it was for the best, as they would never understand, and he didn't want me to be disowned like they had done to Nathan. Personally, I didn't care if they did. After all, I couldn't understand how a family could do something so horrible to a fellow family member. Just as I was about to attend college, my Aunt Chantrell became very sick, and although the doctors tried their best, she passed away. It was so incredibly devastating, especially when my Uncle Terry and grandparents made an appearance at the funeral. They were smiling from ear to ear and were loving seeing that Chantrell had passed away. Nathan did his best to ignore them, but then Uncle Terry went up and tried to take a selfie next to the open casket, and Uncle Nathan couldn't hold back his frustrations anymore. Fueled with rage, he ran over and smashed Terry's phone and then proceeded to punch him until he was unconscious. The police had to show up to break up the fight, but luckily no one pressed charges against each other and everyone was allowed to go home. After that, Uncle Nathan took me aside and had some words with me.
Hey Morris, listen, I need to talk to you about something. I know that you are only in college, but I want you to start thinking about your future. You see, just like your aunt, I won't always be here, and since I have no children of my own, I want to leave my businesses to you. Is that something that you would be interested in?
Of course, Uncle Nathan. It would be an honor to continue your legacy. But that isn't for many, many years from now, though. At least that's what I thought. But after my aunt passed away, my Uncle Nathan had lost the will to live. He had loved her so much that he really let his health go, and only a few years after my aunt passed away, Uncle Nathan did as well. It was such a strange thing. The doctors were puzzled, but thought that maybe he had an untreated brain tumor and passed away in his sleep. But my parents and I knew that it was from a broken heart. Without Chantrelle, he had lost the will to live and couldn't imagine a life without her. A week after his funeral, the whole family met at my Uncle Nathan's lawyer's office. My grandparents, my parents, my uncle and I were there, along with Chantrelle's sister and her daughter. The office felt very crowded, but thankfully the reading of the will didn't take very long. The lawyer read it and announced that Chantrelle's sister and niece would receive a very large sum of money, as well as a lake house that my aunt and uncle had owned. My parents would receive enough money to pay off their house, as they always supported Nathan and Chantrelle. As for me, my aunt and uncle left me all of their businesses, as well as enough money to run them for several years, so that I could have plenty of time to learn how to run them efficiently. My grandparents and uncle were furious. They had expected to get something as well and couldn't understand why they had been excluded. Later, after we were back at my grandparents' house, my uncle approached me.
Hey Morris, listen, you're way too young to be able to handle all those businesses on your own.
I don't think that I agree with you. I'm almost done with college, and Uncle Nathan has been preparing me for this for a long time.
That idiot didn't know what he was talking about. Look at how he debased himself by marrying a black woman. He could have married a beautiful white woman and had carried on the family name, but instead, he wasted his life with an inferior woman.
How can you say that about him or about Aunt Chantrelle? She was an amazing woman.
Oh, now he has you saying stupid stuff too. Chantrelle wasn't even human. You would do yourself well to never get mixed up with someone who isn't white. At any rate, just give it some thought. It's only fair that you share the wealth with the rest of the family after all.
His words angered me so much, and so I just stormed off. Honestly, how could you allow your heart to be so full of hate? It was so incredibly disgusting. I especially found it funny that he had expected my Uncle Nathan to have children and carry on the family name, because every woman that my Uncle Terry approached were instantly disgusted by him. Hence, why my father and Uncle Nathan were so important to have children. At any rate, I did my best to try to ignore his foolish comments and just focus on taking over Uncle Nathan's businesses. When then, an idea came to me. As I went over the various companies that Uncle Nathan owned, I saw a tech company that did not fit in with the rest. I instantly knew what I needed to do with it, and so I called up my Uncle Terry. Hey, Uncle Terry. I may have been hasty the other day, and I wanted to apologize to you and to show you that there are no hard feelings. I wanted to make a great offer to you.
Oh yeah? Well, go ahead. Let's hear it. I don't have all day.
Well, I can't just give you a company, but I do have one that shows a lot of potential, and I can sell it to you for $70,000. All you have to do is buy it from me and take on the ownership, and you'll be made a millionaire practically overnight.
Is that so? What's the catch?
No catch. The pay is just for legal purposes. Honestly, there are so many companies to keep track of that you'll be doing me a huge favor. That company made over $1 million in profit last year, and I know that you'll do good things with it.
Well, shoot. Okay, you have yourself a deal. I knew that you would come around and see things our way.
I did in fact not see things their way. But I needed him to take the bait, and he did. Hook, line, and sinker. The truth was that there was a really huge problem with the company, but I wasn't going to tell my uncle anything of the sort. And after my lawyer took care of all the paperwork and passed off the ownership of the company to my uncle, I had to stifle a laugh as we shook on the deal. The fool thought he was going to be rich beyond his dreams, but he had bought nothing but his own doom. You see, the year before the company was incredibly profitable, but they had invested all their profit and had taken out massive loans to cover their expenses. Unfortunately, this year had been devastating to them, and only some very good or miraculous leadership could right that ship and make them not go bankrupt. And my Uncle Terry was most certainly not that person. 2 months after I sold him the company, I had finished up college and was putting in a lot of work and effort to learn the ropes of how to manage all the various businesses that I had inherited. It was a lot of difficult work and late nights with little sleep, but as the weeks passed, I found it easier and easier to manage. The more I got to know the various general managers and managers in general, the more I could trust them to handle more tasks, and things began to really run smoothly. As for my uncle, though, he was struggling to keep things afloat, and he called me up to complain and give crap.
You sold me a lemon. You knew that they were in financial ruin and you lied and told me that they would make me rich.
I did nothing of the sort. I told you that they were profitable last year. Honestly, with a very good leader, they could have continued to be profitable, but you are too stupid to know how to do that. Chantrell, however, would have been able to. I guess that makes you inferior human after all. It's almost as if the color of someone's skin doesn't matter at all. But the contents of their brain do, and yours is clearly empty. Sorry that you have buyer's remorse, but you're stuck with them.
No, Morris, please. I need your help. Can't you buy the company back? Or maybe loan me some money so I can get it going and maybe try to become profitable again?
Why would I do that?
If you don't, then I'll be ruined. You know that when I bought the company that I took over their debt. If they go bankrupt, it will ruin me. I'll never be able to pay back all the money that they owe. Please help me.
I chose to ignore him, after all. This had been my plan all along. A few weeks passed, and my uncle was forced to liquidate the company and to declare bankruptcy. He was right. He owed so much money that there was no way that he could ever earn enough money to pay off all that debt. It would take him 10 lifetimes in order to do so. In the end, he was so depressed that he took his own life. Deep down, I did feel guilty, but after the way he and my grandparents had treated Chantrell and Nathan, I felt that it was a bit justified. As for my grandparents, Terry had been their primary caregiver as they were unable to live on their own anymore. My parents ended up putting them in a home full of black caregivers as they had no desire to live with them, as they were even more racist than my Uncle Terry had been. So my grandparents were treated horribly and were constantly calling and asking my parents to take them back home, but they refused. I'm sure they wished to die than stay there. Did my parents do a bad thing?
You don't have to keep lying. I'm going to leave you out here to starve to death. It will be slow and painful, and once I know you are dead, I will bury you out here, and no one will ever know what happened to you.
And with that, she left me tied up in the cabin. Hi there, my name is Cassandra, and I have had to go through quite the ordeal. I had been married to my husband Eric for several years. We were introduced to each other through mutual friends, and we instantly fell in love with each other. Things were going really well, and it wasn't long until we started dating and eventually got engaged. We were very happy, but both of us knew that we wanted to wait until we were both properly established in our careers before marriage. He was in school to become an engineer while I was in business school, and spent a lot of time studying the stock market. Soon after we both graduated, Eric was able to find a job with a very large firm. His starting salary was very impressive, but we chose to keep renting the same small apartment so that we could save up and buy a house when we were truly ready. Sadly, I wasn't so lucky though, but I was determined to help out as much as I could, and so I got a job at a restaurant as a server to help with the bills. Around that time, Eric wanted us to introduce each other to our parents. He figured it was way past time for us to do so, and I completely agreed. Although, after I met his parents, I was rather sure that we had made a terrible mistake.
Mom and Dad, this is Cassandra, my fiancée.
Hello there, Cassandra. It's nice to meet you.
Yes, and it's very nice to meet you as well.
So tell me, Cassandra, where do you work?
Well, right now I'm just working at a restaurant, but I have plans to do something much more interesting soon.
Really? Eric, is this really the woman that you want to marry? Some sleazy waitress?
Mom, Cassandra isn't a sleazy waitress. For your information, she graduated from business school. She's only working as a waitress because she wants to contribute to our bills. With my new job, she could just stay home and do nothing, but that isn't the kind of person that she is.
She certainly doesn't sound very impressive to me. She sounds like a freeloader.
The rest of the night was much of the same, and by the time that we went home, I hated my future mother-in-law. Eric promised me that her words didn't matter to him, and that he knew that I was going to do great things with my life, and even if I didn't, that he would still love me. His father had been very warm, though, and that did make the whole encounter much more bearable at least. After a few months, though, I was growing tired of how Eric's mother was treating me. She would call him every other day and bad-mouth me to him. She would tell him that I was going to steal all of his money and that he needed to leave me as soon as possible, or else I would leave him broke, penniless, and depressed. It got so bad that he started letting her calls go to voicemail just so that he wouldn't have to listen to her. I was so sick of her constant abuse. It made me feel like such a complete loser. And so I asked Eric if it would be okay if I took some of the money I made from waitressing and invested it into the stock market. He told me that he completely supported me doing so. So after a couple weeks of analyzing several dozen companies, I picked 3 that had potential and invested my entire paycheck in them. 1 week later, I had more than doubled my initial investment, and I then took that money and reinvested it into several companies that I liked, and sure enough, the next week I had quadrupled my investment. I began picking more companies and holding them for varying amounts of time. Some I lost money on, but the majority of them earned me quite a bit of money. Before long, I had made more investing in the stock market than Eric had made in the last 2 years. We were so excited, and Eric was incredibly proud of me.
Honey, I knew that you would do well. But I never dreamed that you would do this well so quickly. We have more than enough to buy whatever home that we want.
Thank you, Eric. I couldn't have done it without your support, though.
Nope, it was all you. You're just a wizard at playing the stock market. It's almost like you're psychic or something. We should call my parents and rub your success in my mother's face.
No, please don't do that. She'll just find a different reason to pick on me. Honestly, your mom just hates me. It is what it is. It felt terrible admitting that I would never be liked by my future mother-in-law, but I couldn't avoid it. She just refused to ever see me as a good match for her son. The one thing that I did request was that we pick a date and make plans for a wedding. With my investing skills, I earned enough money to completely cover the cost of the wedding, while still putting money aside for our future house as well. At the wedding, Eric's mother stared daggers at me the entire time and refused to say anything to me. Few months after our wedding, we bought our dream home and moved into it. It was such an amazing house, and it was close to Eric's job. I had an office built inside the library of the home, and I kept investing. We would eventually need more money to cover the costs of the children that we would have, as well as their schooling. Between the money I earned and Eric's salary, we were living quite comfortably. That is, until tragedy struck. I would never have guessed that I would become a widow at the age of 31. But sure enough, Eric was driving home from work one day, and a drunk driver got into a head-on collision with him. The accident was so terrible that both men died instantly. I was so furious. Not only had this stranger killed my husband, but he died, which meant that he wouldn't face any judgment for his crime. It was so infuriating. What made matters worse is that no sooner had my husband was buried and gone, did my mother-in-law begin coming around. At first, I thought maybe tragedy had made her see the light, and that she was coming around to make sure that I was okay. But of course, that wasn't the case. She will always come around and bully me, saying she wants all her son's property. Then one day she came.
Well, congratulations. Looks like you got what you wanted. My son is dead and you inherited everything, including this house that he paid for. I guess it must feel really good to be a freeloader and never have to work hard for anything.
Oh, will you shove it up your ass? I earned the money that paid for this house. My husband made good money, but it was my skills that paid for this house.
I don't believe you. You're lying and I'll make you regret it.
Before I even knew what was going on, she rushed towards me and put a cloth up to my face. The second that I began to feel loopy, I knew that she had doused the cloth with chloroform. I couldn't stay awake, and I fell asleep. When I woke up, I was tied up in the back of a moving car. Eventually, I felt the car stop, and Eric's mother opened the trunk and dragged me out of it and into what looked like an abandoned cabin.
There. Now I'll leave you here to rot while I head back and reclaim my son's house. I always knew that you were useless. I'm only sorry that my son never saw it and died before he could move on and find someone worthy of how amazing he was.
Enough. Your son loved me, and I was a great wife to him. I was never a freeloader. In fact, I made more money than him, and I not only paid completely for our wedding, but also for our house too. He made good money, but I was the breadwinner. Why can't you just accept that I loved your son, and he loved me?
You don't have to keep lying. I'm going to leave you out here to starve to death. It will be slow and painful, and once I know you are dead, I will bury you out here, and no one will ever know what happened to you.
And with that, she left me tied up in the cabin. For 2 solid days, I struggled to free myself from my bonds, and every time I heard any noises outside, I would scream and hope that it was a hiker or a hunter. By the time that the 3rd day rolled around, I was losing hope and I began to cry when I heard a car pull up outside. I instantly began to scream, and seconds later, Eric's father burst into the cabin and untied me. As it turned out, his wife had told him that I had run off with all of Eric's money since he was dead. He had found it rather odd that I would leave after the funeral if that had been my intentions, but also that I wouldn't sell the house but leave it behind. He instantly knew that something weird was going on, and he began to look for me. At first, he checked in with all my friends and family, but then he decided on a hunch to check his wife's old family cabin, and that was when he found me. I thanked him so much, and the 2 of us drove back to my home where we found my mother-in-law giving a statement to the police. She was filing for a missing persons report and claiming that I had skipped town. As soon as I saw her, I attacked her and dug my nails into her face. She screamed out in pain and fear, and it took 2 police officers to pull me off of her in spite of the fact that I was weak from days without food or water. Once they pulled me off, I told the police what she had done, which of course she denied. But then my father-in-law stepped up and told them that it was all true. After they heard his statement, they immediately arrested her and dragged her away. The next couple of weeks were a bit of a blur as it took me a while to recover from the ordeal. Between the days without food and having only lost my husband a short time before that, I was a mess. However, in spite of that, my mother-in-law was sentenced to 20 years in prison. As if that wasn't enough, her husband divorced her and told her that she had disgraced their son's memory by behaving like a crazy person. From what I hear, she gets into fights regularly in prison and is hated. If she manages to survive for the next 20 years in prison, I would be surprised. As for my father-in-law, well, he was pretty broken up about what had happened, but he did eventually recover, and I put my skills to good use and helped him out by tripling the amount of money he had in his retirement fund, helping him ensure that he would have whatever money he would ever need to stay happy, healthy, and comfortable. It was the least I could do. After all, he did save my life. And me, well, it's taken me some time to process everything that happened, but I think I'm ready to get out there and start dating again. I don't know if I'll find anyone as amazing as my husband, but I know that he wouldn't want me to be alone. Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe and leave a comment down below saying I subscribed, and we will try our best to reply to your comment. By the time I returned, 2 weeks later, I was met with the shock of my life. After watching the recordings from his car and the voice recorder that I had left in our bedroom, I now knew the truth. My husband was having an affair with my best friend. Not only that, but he was also planning to divorce me once Jason was 18. The 2 of them had even begun making plans to kill my brother and take his inheritance. That was the reason he adopted him, so that it would be easier for him. I was dumbfounded. My parents were both successful business people in New York. My father owned 3 thriving chocolate companies, while my mother had one that exported fabrics to different countries. In other words, we were wealthy. My brother Jason was born 10 years after me, but was born with crippled legs. They were unable to grow muscles very well and were said to be too weak to hold him up. My parents had him undergo necessary surgeries and a variety of different therapy sessions, but nothing worked. We finally gave up trying and accepted his condition. He had to move with the aid of a special wheelchair. However, his disability didn't stop us from loving him. Instead, it made us love him more. The 2 of us very close. We wore matching clothes throughout our childhood and teenage years despite the large difference in our ages, and had each other's backs when needed. Over the years, our parents' businesses grew even broader. We went to the best schools, and by the time I was 25, I'd completed my education and was ready to get into the world of business. As expected, my father put me in charge of one of his companies. One afternoon, I was at a park with my brother, enjoying the evening breeze, when a young man approached us.
Hello, I'm Desmond. Can I sit with you both?
He looked quite decent. Nevertheless, I alerted our bodyguard who was standing around. We had been hounded by a few reporters in the past, and I thought he could be one. In case he wanted to start interviewing us, our bodyguard would come out to stop him. However, he proved my thoughts wrong. He simply spent the 30 minutes he sat with us reading. Afterward, he left. 2 weeks later, I had to recruit workers for some new positions I had created, and Desmond was one of those who applied. I was impressed at how well he did and took him in before others.
Thank you very much, ma'am. I'll make sure to do my best.
True to his word, he showed his efficiency in the first 2 months, and as time went on, he was excelling at any task that he was given. Seeing this, I figured that he would make a great personal assistant, and I offered him the position. He eagerly accepted, and we began working and spending more time together, which made us get closer than we ever thought. One day, after working, he confessed to me.
I have a huge crush on you, ma'am.
I was shocked, yes, but it was mutual. I couldn't deny that I also liked him. Our relationship proceeded from there, and soon I had to introduce him to my parents.
Isn't he just an employee? Are you sure he truly loves you, or he's just here for your money?
They were doubtful about his intentions, but I did my best to convince them that he was being real with me. My brother, who hadn't seen him since the first time we met, recognized him and took a liking to him immediately. After some time, he proposed to me. Jason congratulated us when we announced it to my family.
Desmond treats me so well. I support your marriage.
Although my parents were still quite doubtful, they had no choice but to support their daughter's happiness. Our wedding wasn't so elaborate, but it was grand. According to Desmond, his parents were dead and he had no relatives, so he had no one by him for the wedding. But I didn't mind. 3 months after our wedding, my parents met with a plane crash accident that claimed their lives. It was a tough period for my brother and I. But Desmond was there for us. He comforted us until we managed to get over it. 3 months later, he suddenly brought up a proposal.
Since Jason isn't of age to control the other companies, why don't I take charge until then?
I didn't like the idea and refused. That brought about our first argument.
I'm your husband. Don't you trust me to do well?
I let him understand that I trusted him. However, even though I didn't like the idea, my parents had set a rule that no one except my brother and I could run the companies. He finally understood my point, and that issue died. I managed to oversee all companies and ensured to expand them even more than my parents did. My husband still worked under me, and I was grateful that he was satisfied with it. Around that time, we began trying to have a child, but none came. Worried, I went to a doctor to find out what was wrong, and they told me that I would need years of fertility treatments if I wanted a chance of becoming pregnant. I was devastated, but as usual, my husband comforted me.
2-3 years isn't a long time. I can wait.
I felt relieved. If Desmond was fine with waiting, I was too. Sometime later, he brought up another suggestion.
Babe, why don't we adopt your brother? While we wait for our children, let's start learning to be parents by taking care of him.
I tried to tell him that Jason was fine being my brother and his in-law, but Desmond was persistent on adopting him. After a few persuasions, I finally agreed. After all, it's entirely for our good. I informed my brother, who was 15 years of age, about our plan. He seemed skeptical about agreeing at first, but he later did after I convinced him that Desmond would be a great father to him, and it would help me learn to be a good mother.
I'm only agreeing to this because I love you both.
We soon began the necessary process. It took about 2 weeks, and afterward we were both legal parents of my brother. Desmond proved to be a great father. He was doing so well that I was free to leave Jason in his care when I had to travel to Italy to take care of an important issue that arose in my father's second company. However, when I returned, I got some news that didn't sit well with me.
Aunt Kathy came over while you were away, and she was here until yesterday. She always slept in the same room with Desmond. He barely had time for me and treated me differently during that period.
I was surprised. Kathy was my best friend, and she told me she was away on a vacation in the UK. I asked my brother if he was sure about what he was saying, and he confirmed that he was. Kathy and Desmond were always bickering every time they were around each other. How could she suddenly spend a whole week with him, and while I was away? I confronted Desmond.
What? How could Jason tell such a lie? I was hardly ever home because I was always at work. You can ask the chef. She was the one who watched over Jason throughout the period you were away.
I called the chef and she confessed that Desmond was telling the truth. I felt betrayed. Why would Jason tell such a lie? I disciplined him greatly. However, no matter how much words I said to him, he stuck to the fact that he was telling the truth. I buried the issue and apologized to Desmond. I also had Jason apologize to him too. A week later, I had to travel again. This time, I spent 3 weeks. On the day I was to return, I got a video message from Jason. As I opened it, I was shocked to see Kathy leaving the house with Desmond. I hurriedly returned home.
I was telling the truth. He's cheating on you.
I was furious. I requested a video call with Kathy, and when she accepted, I saw that she was in bed with her husband. I thought she was pretending and asked her husband a few questions. In his response,
We've been home together all day. What are you talking about?
I was confused. What do I believe? The picture clearly showed Kathy, and Jason said she left that morning, but Kathy's husband was saying otherwise. I couldn't confront Desmond again. Jason had told me how Desmond threatened to kill him if he said anything to me again. I decided to confide in one of my friends who gave me some advice.
You have to see it yourself to know the truth.
I followed her advice. Before I had to travel again, I contacted my personal lawyer. If it ended up being true, I was going to file for divorce. I set a camera in his car and a voice recorder before leaving again. I spent even longer there. By the time I returned, 2 weeks later, I was met with the shock of my life. After watching the recordings from his car and the voice recorder that I had left in our bedroom, I now knew the truth. My husband was having an affair with my best friend. Not only that, but he was also planning to divorce me once Jason was 18. The two of them had even begun making plans to kill my brother and take his inheritance. That was the reason he adopted him, so that it would be easier for him. I was dumbfounded to think that I didn't believe my brother and stupidly made him apologize for trying to tell me the truth. After giving the voice recordings to my lawyer, I stormed to Kathy's house. I was speechless when I arrived and saw not one but 2 Kathys. She introduced the second lady as her best friend. I explained what I was there for and showed the video to her and her best friend. In it, Kathy was making plans to kill my brother and then had used her best friend to make it look like she was innocent. Having been found out, Kathy was disappointed.
I'm so sorry for my behavior toward your family, Amelia. Please forgive her.
But I wasn't interested in forgiveness. I called the police and she was taken away. I stormed to my company with more police officers and arrested Desmond. Confused and not knowing what was happening, he yelled as they pulled him away.
Let go of me! I'm not a criminal!
At the station, they were both told their crimes and bowed their heads in shame. They were charged in court for planning to murder. Desmond had a longer term because at the time, Jason was his son. I divorced him and took full custody of my brother, ensuring he would never have any right over him. My brother and I relocated to Italy afterward. 5 years later, Desmond was released. I'd gotten married to someone better 2 years before. Hearing that he was out, I returned to the country with my husband, Jason, and my daughter. He heard that I was in town and came to see me to tender his apology. He was without a job and had no house of his own. He told me that his parents, which he lied at the beginning were dead, were in serious debts and also had failing health, and he needed his job back as companies were refusing to accept an ex-convict as an employee. I refused, telling him, "I wish you suffer for the rest of your miserable life." Afterward, I had my security men drag him out of my office and throw him out of the building. Months later, received a call from his parents that he made some really bad friends and was so broken they decided to rob a jewelry shop and was shot in the process. Thanks for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe.
Isabel, some people just aren't cut out for certain things. Baking is one of them. You should focus on working in the office.
She made fun of me, insisted I focus only on the office, and tried to discourage me. She forced me to give my entire monthly salary to pay for her bills, manicures, and expensive designer dresses. Broke, and with no money to pay for baking classes, Hi there, I'm Isabel, and I want to share a tough part of my life. My parents died in a car accident when I was young, and I was adopted by my Aunt Sissy, a woman who always had a frown on her face. Instead of supporting me, she made things hard. Growing up with Aunt Sissy, I was a quiet and shy kid. Aunt Sissy always made me feel unsure of myself. She said a lot of things that made me feel small. Because of her, I became a bit reserved and didn't express myself much. I was scared to disappoint her, so I didn't follow my true passion for baking. Aunt Sissy's strong personality and constant criticism made me a quiet and shy person. It was tough to be myself because of what she thought. Aunt Sissy was bossy too. She liked to be in charge of everything in my life. She told me what to do and how to do it all the time. It was hard to speak up or make choices on my own because of her strong control. She wanted to control even the smallest things, not giving me much freedom. Aunt Sissy's bossiness wasn't just in what she said. It showed in her actions too. She always wanted things done exactly her way. If I didn't fold the bedsheets a certain way, she had a fit. She always expected me to make breakfast and serve her in bed every Sunday. While other kids talked about their dreams, I wanted to be a baker, but my aunt had different plans. Growing up, she would laugh off my dream and say it wasn't practical. After high school, I got a job in an office, like she wanted. But deep down, I felt something was missing. So, after work, I decided to take baking classes. I tried to talk to her, but she was always so negative towards me.
Baking classes? Isabel, you need to be practical. You have a stable job in the office. Why waste your time on something so frivolous?
But Aunt, baking makes me happy. I want to follow my passion.
Passion won't pay the bills, Isabel. Stick to your office job. It's responsible, unlike this baking nonsense. You're just setting yourself up for disappointment. Besides, let's be honest, dear, you don't have any talent for baking.
How would you know? I've never even had a chance to try.
Isabel, some people just aren't cut out for certain things. Baking is one of them. You should focus on working in the office.
She made fun of me, insisted I focus only on the office, and tried to discourage me. She forced me to give my entire monthly salary to pay for her bills, manicures, and expensive designer dresses. Broke, and with no money to pay for baking classes, I secretly took out a loan, which helped pay for my courses. But I stuck with my dream, working during the day and attending baking classes at night for 2 years until I finished my training. When I finished my training, Aunt Sissy found out that I completed a baking course, and she was furious. She threw me out of the house with just the clothes I was wearing and a few things in a small suitcase. I had confided in another student, Robert, who knew that I was being bullied by my aunt. He called his sister, June, who happened to need a roommate in her apartment downtown. Aunt Sissy was furious that I was able to find a place to stay so fast, and she wanted me to beg her to come back. I told her that I didn't need her help anymore and told her to find someone else to harass. Meanwhile, I wasn't getting along at the office with the manager, Ms. Dishard, who kept piling on the work and never giving me any positive feedback. After another year with no performance bonus, I had enough and quit. But not before I found a vacant space to open my own bakery business. Using a small business loan, I set up shop. My dream of having a successful bakery came true with Isabel's Bakes. People flocked to my bakery on its opening day, drawn in by the delicious smells and treats. The positive reviews spread quickly, making my bakery an instant hit. My aunt, who always doubted my baking dreams, heard about my business success and saw the lineup whenever she drove by my shop. My smart marketing made my bakery even more popular. Social media buzzed with pictures of my tasty pastries, and orders poured in. My aunt, feeling threatened, entered a baking contest to prove she was better. But I won, making my aunt even more frustrated. I was shocked when a regular customer told me that there was a middle-aged lady in the front of the store spreading false stories about my shop to customers. I had my friend install a listening device, and I heard some awful things.
Well, look at this. Isabel's bakery might seem popular, but I heard some things.
What did you hear?
Health code violations. I heard they're not keeping things clean. You might want to think twice before buying anything.
Really? I had no idea.
Oh, yes, and there are rumors about cheap ingredients. You know, you get what you pay for. You might want to be careful where you spend your money.
It was a challenging moment, but it became a turning point. The trust we built that day went beyond the baked goods. It was a bond with the community that would withstand whatever Aunt Sissy threw our way. However, to completely put an end to Aunt Sissy's rumors, I decided to take a proactive approach. I contacted local newspapers and community forums, sharing the truth about the false claims. I provided evidence of our clean kitchen and high-quality ingredients, and I even invited journalists to visit the bakery for an unbiased inspection.
Today, we visited Isabel's Bakes after rumors surfaced about health code violations. What we found was a well-maintained, spotless kitchen and a commitment to using top-notch ingredients.
The positive news coverage not only cleared our name, but also garnered sympathy and support from the wider community. Aunt Sissy's attempts to spread false rumors were exposed, and the community rallied behind the bakery, recognizing the dishonesty in her actions. Still, I wanted to confront Aunt Sissy about her actions, which hurt me very much. I asked for a meeting in my shop. Aunt Sissy, why did you do this? I built this with all my hard work.
You forget that I gave you a home when you were young. I fed you and bought you clothes. You stopped paying my bills and I was angry.
Let me live my life now. I don't need you anymore.
You'll be sorry.
I was so glad to get Aunt Sissy out of my life. However, every few months, things were happening that were mysterious. My tires were slashed and my windows were often smashed. Who was doing this? I set up video surveillance and discovered it was Aunt Sissy. I was so mad that I filed a police report against Aunt Sissy, who was out of the country on holiday. 6 months later, I heard from my aunt. It appears that she made some bad investments and her stocks were tumbling. She also told me that her renter was not paying the rent and was constantly having parties. She had no choice but to evict him. The renter came back the next day and set her place on fire. Her home was destroyed and she had no place to stay. Aunt Sissy came to my bakery and begged me to help her.
Please, Isabel, I need your help.
How can I help you?
I texted you that someone set my house on fire and I have no place to go.
I can't help you. It's your problem.
How can you do this to your own family?
You slashed my tires and broke my windows in my bakery shop. You are not my family.
I am an old woman and I don't know any better. Please help me. Forgive me.
Tell it to the judge. Get out of my life. You bullied me all of my life and you spread false rumors about my bakery because you were jealous of my success. You are not my family. Things got really bad when Aunt Sissy got super angry. Her frustrations about money turned into a big problem, and I couldn't believe it as she started breaking things in the bakery with her fists. It was like a sad and chaotic event. The police showed up quickly to stop her, putting handcuffs on Aunt Sissy. She looked defeated and was taken away, leaving behind a mess in the bakery. After a few days, there were more problems for Aunt Sissy. She had to deal with the law not just for breaking things, but also for doing something dishonest, writing bad checks. She asked me to drop all the charges, but I refused to do so because she needed to be taught a lesson. For myself, I am glad that I managed to finally break away from Aunt Sissy. She was a terrible person who tried to destroy my life out of jealousy. Aunt Sissy never wanted to find happiness for me. Today, I am married to a wonderful man with a new baby on the way. Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe and leave a comment down below saying, "I subscribed," and we will try our best to reply to your comment. Yes, ma'am. Thank you for having me.
Mom Angela and I are getting married. I proposed to her yesterday.
You did what? This is unbelievable. I told you to stop seeing each other. This is a huge mistake. She's a liar and she's ugly. She probably will cheat on you.
I will be with whoever I want to be with. I'm an adult now. You need to be okay with this, because it's happening. The wedding is going to be 6 months from now, and you're welcome to come if you want.
If you try to have this wedding, you'll regret it. Now get out of my house.
Oh, hi. My name is Angela, and my love story is a bit of a mess. About a year ago today, I married the love of my life. His name is Ben. Our life together feels like a fairy tale now, but it wasn't always this way. My fiancé's mother has always been an issue in our relationship and was almost the reason for a disaster on our wedding day. My love story is far from what you dream about as a little girl, and I will tell you why, including the details about my mother-in-law from hell. Ben and I met one day while I was shopping at the mall. I was on the last item in my list, and it required me to take the elevator down to the bottom floor. When I got into the elevator, a handsome man got in right after, and we said hello to each other. I didn't think too much about him at first, but all of a sudden the elevator shook, then stopped. It had broken down, and I was stuck in it with this handsome man. We began to talk, and I realized he actually had a great personality too. He asked me on a date, and it was on that date when I realized that I was in love with Ben, and we quickly became boyfriend and girlfriend. Ben and I liked the same kind of music, which was especially important to me. We also shared the same favorite food, sushi. I knew he was the one when we realized we both shared the love of animals. We were even both studying to become veterinarians. It seemed like everything I learned about him made me fall even deeper in love with him. When we first began dating, Ben had told me how close he is to his mother, especially ever since his dad passed away when he was only 9. He explained how ever since this happened, she has been very protective of him and weary of new girlfriends. I was very sympathetic with him and was okay with waiting to meet her until we became more serious. On the other hand, I brought Ben to meet my parents right away, and they immediately loved him. They laughed at all his jokes and loved to hear that he volunteered at homeless shelters on the weekend. It only became awkward once when my dad asked what Ben's dad did for work. Not knowing he had passed away long ago, my dad was confused when Ben's head lowered and he did not respond. I explained to my family what had happened, and my dad felt horrible for asking. Instead of getting upset, Ben understood completely and even offered to help clean up from dinner. Ben eventually decided it was time to inform his mother he had a new girlfriend. He called her and explained that he fell in love with me and that I was the best thing that's ever happened to him. His mother practically screamed at him in horror when she heard this. Then she just hung up. Ben's mother was worried about losing her son, which caused her to have unrealistic standards for the girls he would bring home growing up. On top of this, Ben's family never had much money, and she was always worried he would leave her with no help to pay any of the bills. When my family heard this, they immediately offered to help out if anything ever went wrong, and Ben was extremely grateful for this gesture. Safe to say, my family was much more accepting of Ben than his mother was of me. Ben had talked to his mother more, and finally convinced her to allow him to bring me over for lunch one afternoon. I was super nervous to meet his mom, the woman who he loved so much. To impress his mom, I had decided to bake an apple pie to bring to lunch as a gift. When we got to his house, I noticed how his house needed some work, and how it was in a neighborhood that was high in crime. This didn't matter to me at all. I loved Ben no matter what. When we knocked on the door, his mother opened the door quickly and glared at me. She gave Ben a big hug and asked him to introduce me. Ben introduced me, and she shook my hand and told me to call her Rita. She showed us inside, and I placed the apple pie on the counter. We sat down on the couch to talk before lunch.
So, Angela, have you had many boyfriends before?
Only one back in high school.
You hear that, Ben? You won't be the first.
Mom, come on. Let's just eat lunch. Then we will dig into that delicious pie Angela brought for us.
I was hurt by what she said, but I decided to brush it off and went to go eat with Ben and his mother. We had steaks and Brussels sprouts, but the steak was horribly cooked, and the Brussels sprouts had no flavor. It was clear to me that Rita was a bad cook, but I decided to keep that to myself. Once we were done eating, I brought the pie over to the table.
So, Angela, what are you studying in school?
I'm also going to be a veterinarian. I love animals just like Ben.
Are you serious? You must be stalking my son. How can you have so much in common with him? I don't believe you, and I don't think you guys should be seeing each other, and I'm definitely not eating this horrid pie.
Mom, please don't do that.
I couldn't believe my eyes when Rita got up and threw my pie right in the trash before ordering us to leave. It was obvious she didn't approve of our relationship at all. That night, I stayed up crying, worried about our relationship ending because of Ben's mother's hate for me. The next day, I went to the park with one of my friends to discuss it. Her name was Macy, and we had been friends since middle school.
So do you really think he's going to break up with you?
You should have seen how much his mom hates me. It breaks my heart.
I'm sorry you're going through this rough patch in your relationship, but if Ben truly loves you, he will not break up with you because of this.
I hope you're right. That very night, I got a text from Ben. He told me to meet him at our favorite spot, a scenic lookout over a beautiful lake, the place where he first told me he loved me. My heart dropped. This was it. Ben was going to break up with me. I sulked my way to our spot and approached him nervously. What he did next still gives me butterflies to this day. He got down on one knee and proposed to me. He told me I was the love of his life, and he wasn't going to let anything get in the way of us being together. I hugged him and said yes. In the back of my mind, I knew how much this was going to bother his mom, but I didn't let it ruin the moment. When my parents heard we were finally getting married after 5 years of dating, they were thrilled. They completely supported us and even offered to pay for the entire wedding. Things finally felt like they were falling into place until it was time to tell Ben's mother about our engagement. We drove up to her house and nervously knocked on the door. She opened the door and glared at me.
Mom, we have some big news. Can we come inside?
Fine, but that girl isn't staying long. Come in, but Angela, take off those dirty shoes.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for having me.
Mom, Angela and I are getting married. I proposed to her yesterday.
You did what? This is unbelievable. I told you to stop seeing each other. This is a huge mistake. She's a liar and she's ugly. She probably will cheat on you.
I will be with whoever I want to be with. I'm an adult now. You need to be okay with this, because it's happening. The wedding is going to be 6 months from now, and you're welcome to come if you want.
If you try to have this wedding, you'll regret it. Now get out of my house.
As we left, I felt tears start to well up in my eyes. Ben noticed and tried to comfort me. His mother was yet again causing strain on our relationship, and I didn't know what to do. The next 6 months flew by. We were constantly kept busy with planning and setting up the perfect wedding. When the big day had finally arrived, Ben and I took a deep breath and looked out into the beautiful venue we had set up, and we smiled at each other. It was only a couple of hours until I was finally going to get married to the love of my life. Just then, we noticed something odd. There was a peculiar smell coming from across the venue. It smelled like gasoline. We followed the smell until it got stronger and stronger, and then I heard some splashing. We saw down the hall that there was someone holding a canister of gasoline, dumping it all over the carpets of the venue. We kept quiet, and I pulled out my phone to record. When the criminal turned around, we were shocked to see it was Rita, my soon-to-be husband's mother, who was trying to sabotage our wedding. When I was sure I got a clear video of Rita doing this awful deed, we yelled out for security. They came quickly and witnessed Rita pouring gasoline all over their venue, and they quickly tackled her to the ground and brought her to us. And what exactly do you think you're doing?
You were never right for my son, and you never will be.
I can't believe you've done this, Mom.
I'm the love of his life, and he is the love of mine. We will spend the rest of our life together, and there's nothing you can do to stop it, especially now, since you'll be spending the remainder of our wedding in jail.
Yeah, right! You have no proof. I'll be a free woman in no time.
Actually, no. I recorded the whole thing on my phone. I'm going to call the police and have you arrested immediately.
You're going away for a long time.
Curse you, Angela. You'll pay for this one day.
Once the police arrived, it didn't take long for them to put Rita in handcuffs and escort her to jail. With video evidence of her crime and witnesses to confirm she did it, she wouldn't be a free woman for a very long time. The rest of the day was a blur of happiness and relief. Ben and I carried out our dream wedding, and all of our friends and family attended, just as planned. It scares me how close Rita was to ruining our wedding. After our honeymoon, we saw in the paper that Rita had been sentenced to 15 years in a maximum security prison, and I couldn't help but feel like justice had been served. Some of my friends think her punishment might have been a little too harsh, but I don't. What do you think? When my brother went to the bathroom, Angela got up and rolled me into a secluded room. What the heck are you doing?
Shut up. Just listen to me. You're not coming to me and Gary's wedding, and that's final.
But why?
Because you're a cripple. It's gross. And don't mention this to Gary either. Just make up your own excuse.
Growing up was difficult for me. My earliest memories consist of bullies at school making fun of me because I was disabled. It wasn't always this way. I used to be one of the top female basketball players in my country. until one fateful day when I was 11 years old, me and my family were on vacation at our local amusement park. I really wanted to ride this one specific ride that I was a little too small for, but my mother said no. I just had to have my way, and I waited until my mother was busy tending to my little brother and snuck over to the ride. I snuck past the guard that was checking everyone's height because I knew he wouldn't let me on either. Once on the ride, I was strapped in, but I could tell something was wrong. All of a sudden, the ride started spinning and twirling, and my restraints were becoming loose. I screamed, but it did no good, and at once I was flung from the ride. I landed on my side and completely shattered both of my legs and my hips. I was rushed to the hospital and found out days later that I would probably never walk again. My name is Gracie, I'm 24 now, and I have been in a wheelchair ever since. The worst part about my accident was that I was never able to play my favorite sport, basketball, ever again. I tried playing wheelchair basketball, but it just wasn't the same. On top of this, ever since my disability, I have always had trouble making friends. During school after my accident, I was bullied relentlessly. There was this one kid, Nick, and he was the meanest person I had ever met. I remember one day during lunch, all of my friends had grouped together at a table and were gossiping and telling secrets, which of course was one of my favorite things to do. Anyways, I rolled over to them and tried to join, but Nick stood up and pointed at me and told everyone I was a cripple, and that cripples can't be trusted with secrets. I never forgot that day, but it changed me for the better, because it made me decide that I would never be excluded for my disability ever again. One person that was on my side the whole time was my brother Gary. He was always there for me and defended me from the bullies. If he got word of someone being mean to me, he would beat them up, disregarding the consequences. He's a couple of years older than me, making him 26, and he just gave me some huge news. He told me that he was marrying his girlfriend Angela, telling me she was the love of his life. When he dropped this news, red flags immediately started shooting up. First of all, Angela was over 20 years older than him. She was 50 years old. On top of this, I had heard through the grapevine that Angela has cheated on every boyfriend she has ever had. This clearly was not the type of girl I wanted my brother to marry, but decided to keep this to myself at first because I wanted to spare my brother's heart. But now it had gone too far, and they were getting married. See, I had a hunch about what Angela was really after. My brother was rich, he had started a tech company during the dot-com boom, and he had sold the company some years ago and is now worth millions of dollars. My brother couldn't see these ill intentions like I could, and instead insisted that we get together to celebrate, to which I painfully agreed. Fast forward to that weekend, and I arrived at my brother's house to meet his new fiancée. When she opened the door and looked down at me in my chair, she had a look in her eye that was all too familiar for me. It was the look of disgust and disdain.
You're his sister? The one he loves so much?
Yes, I'm Gracie. Is that so hard to believe? My brother saw me and invited me inside immediately. He told me all about their wedding plans and the things they planned to do with their lives. I loved catching up with my brother, but I noticed that Angela didn't smile once. She didn't even seem to care about the plans my brother was making. When my brother went to the bathroom, Angela got up and rolled me into a secluded room. "What the heck are you doing?"
Shut up. Just listen to me. You're not coming to me and Gary's wedding, and that's final.
But why?
Because you're a cripple. It's gross. And don't mention this to Gary either. Just make up your own excuse.
It felt like I was thrown back into my troubled youth, as I was once again being excluded because of my disability. But I knew that I would not let this slide anymore. I was older and much stronger, and I was going to take a stand. I knew that at first I had to keep calm, so I just told her I would listen to her, and make up some excuse to tell Gary. The rest of the visit went by in a blur as I was plotting my revenge. I realized that to get this evil witch out of me and my brother's life for good, I was going to have to prove it. I knew that my brother would never believe his sweet Angela would say something so harmful to me, as my brother has a tendency to go blind in situations where love is involved. The very next day, I decided to tail Angela. I recruited my best friend Ashley to drive me around on my mission. I knew she was probably cheating on my brother, since she was just after his money anyway. After Angela left work, we watched as she drove to a motel and went into a room with an unknown man. I couldn't say I was surprised. Luckily, I had brought along my professional camera, and I snapped a few pictures of the two walking into the room. But this wasn't enough, so I rolled over to the window and snapped a picture of the two kissing. But I made a huge mistake. The flash of my camera was on, completely giving away my hidden position outside of her room. Angela came storming out of her room and glared at me with unhinged rage.
Oh, look, well, if it isn't the ugly cripple.
I sprung into action and pulled my phone out discreetly to record Angela's verbal harassment. Once I was recording, I knew just what to say to set her off. I knew it. You were cheating on my brother. You are evil.
Yeah, and so what? Your brother is a little nerd. I only want him for his money. As soon as we got married, I knew I would be in the clear to divorce him and take half of everything. Plus, I could never accept a cripple like you as my sister-in-law. It's disgraceful.
You know what, Angela? I feel sorry for you. I rolled away back into the car with Ashley, and we drove off. I have to say, I took no pleasure in revealing this evil side of Angela to my brother, who was hopelessly in love with her. He even threw up when he saw the video and pictures of what his fiancée from hell was really up to. But his sad demeanor slowly transitioned to rage, and he was ready to confront Angela. He called her and told her to come over immediately.
How could you do this? I trusted you, and you threw it in the trash. I want you out of my life immediately, and you won't be getting a dime either.
What? No, she must have faked it. That stupid cripple.
Save it, Angela. Get out of our lives. My revenge on Angela had inspired me and motivated me in ways that I had never felt before. I felt like a new person. I felt like I could do anything. I looked down at my legs and thought about what I would do if I could do anything. That day, I pledged to begin a new journey, the journey to learn to walk again. I expressed my newfound love for life to my brother and explained my plan, and he agreed to fund my journey by buying me the best physical therapist money could buy, along with the high-end equipment to go with the therapy. For the next year and a half, I dedicated every second of my waking being to regaining movement of my legs. I still remember the day I took my first step without any help. I have never cried so many tears of joy. Today, although I walk with a cane to this day, I'm living proof that anything is possible. Oh yeah, I almost forgot to mention something. Last week, I walked into my favorite donut shop that I go to every weekend. I saw a sad-looking man in a wheelchair, and I went over to say hello since I sympathize with those who are in the same position I was once in. When I got all the way up to him, I practically dropped my donut. It was Nick, my bully back from grade school. He explained that he had been in a tragic car accident, which left him paralyzed from the waist down and was never going to walk again. I felt a sense of karma, but to be honest, I did feel bad for him. I decided to be the bigger person, and instead of talking down on him, I gave him words of encouragement and referred him to my physical therapist and told him to never give up. What do you think? Should I have played my cards differently, and was I too harsh on Angela?